and ordinary Americans losing their savings. That political control of money had destroyed economies throughout history. Inflation hit 80% that people couldn't afford even basic necessities, and costing the government billions of dollars in debt service. Make monetary decisions based on economic data, not on political pressure. Here's a question that should concern every American homeowner and business owner. Do you want politicians setting your interest rates based on election cycles and political whims? Or do you want economists setting interest rates based on economic data and analysis? Right now, President Trump is pressuring Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, whom he nominated, to cut interest rates immediately. Trump's reasoning makes political sense. Lower interest rates boost the economy and reduce government borrowing costs. But Powell is resisting. And there's a crucial reason why that resistance protects your family's financial future. Now, welcome to Common Sense for America. I'm Bruce Rutherford, your host and commentator, coming to you from the Westwood Golf Club in Houston, Texas, where I've been thinking about this tension between political pressure and economic wisdom. If you're new to our discussions, welcome. We love having you. For those who've been with us, you know we dig into these issues that affect your daily life, even when they seem complex. Now, to understand why this issue of control over interest rates matters, let us take you back to a pattern that's been repeated throughout American history. Alexander Hamilton pushed for our first central bank in 1791. He did that knowing that political control of money had destroyed economies throughout history. Now, Thomas Jefferson opposed the bank, and frankly, Jefferson's personal financial troubles with British banks colored his judgment. But here's what happened when politics won. President Andrew Jackson destroyed the second bank of the United States in 1832, and the result was predictable. Banking panics, currency chaos, and ordinary Americans losing their savings. It took until 1913, after repeated financial crises, for Congress to create the Federal Reserve with a specific mandate: make monetary decisions based on economic data, not on political pressure. By 1977, Congress refined the Fed's mandate and created the Fed's dual mandate, which is maximum employment and price stability. Notice what's not in the mandate: helping politicians get reelected. Nothing about politicians in the mandate. Now, some folks might say, Bruce, that's ancient history. Surely modern politicians are smarter than that. Well, let's take a look at what's happening today around the world. In Turkey, President Erdogan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, fired 3 central bank governors who wouldn't cut interest rates to boost his political standing. The result? Inflation hit 80%, and ordinary Turkish families watched their savings evaporate. In Argentina, decades of political interference with monetary policy created inflation so severe that people couldn't afford even basic necessities. Compare that to Germany's approach after World War II. They gave their central bank fierce independence, especially to prevent politicians from manipulating money for political gain. The result? Europe's strongest and most stable economy. Now, here's how this actually works for our United States Federal Reserve Bank, and this is why it makes sense. The Fed has 19 decision makers, 7 board members confirmed by the Senate, plus 12 regional bank presidents from across the country. That's 19 economists, not politicians, analyzing thousands of bits of data points before making decisions that affect your mortgage rate, your car loan, your credit cards, and so on. Now, the Fed reports twice a year to Congress, but Congress does not control the Fed. The Fed does not report to the President of the United States. He has no control. Now, at Fed Chairman Powell's recent Jackson Hole speech, he hinted that rate cuts might come in September, but only if inflation data supports it. Now, the standing ovation everyone at that meeting gave him threw their agenda off by 5 minutes. The stock market reacted to that speech by leaping in prices on that news. And that just shows how much power these decisions carry. The key is that Powell is making his call based on economic indicators, not on political pressure. Now, let me bring this home to you in real terms. Every quarter point change in Fed rates affects about $92.5 billion in government interest costs. That's money that comes from your taxes, from my taxes, from your mom and dad's taxes. That's money we pay for. Now, when the Fed raises rates to fight inflation, yes, your mortgage payment might be higher, but your grocery bill stops spiraling out of control. When they cut rates too early, you might get some temporary relief in borrowing, but you'll pay back double or even triple in higher prices on everything else. Now, I understand President Trump's frustration. He sees higher interest rates slowing the economic growth that we would otherwise have and costing the government billions of dollars in debt service. These are legitimate concerns, but here's why Powell's resistance is actually serving everyone's long-term interests. Premature rate cuts could reignite inflation, forcing even higher rates later. Now, that is exactly what happened in the 1970s when our economy was really in trouble. President Trump is also saying he's going to fire Federal Reserve Board member Lisa Cook. Now, Ms. Cook was nominated by Joe Biden and approved by the Senate. It's now come to light that she may have committed some mortgage fraud before she was nominated to be on the board. It's alleged that she may have committed some mortgage fraud. She has not been indicted. She hasn't been found guilty. The law says that the president can remove a Federal Reserve Board member for cause, but the law doesn't define cause. And given that she has not been indicted and not found guilty, I don't see the cause that President Trump could act upon. I see President Trump hurting his own credibility. He's essentially tilting at a political windmill here. And I wish he would drop this and drop his attacks on the Fed.
So one question people are going to have about the Fed is some people argue, especially people on the internet, that the Fed is about as Federal Express. So their autonomy, while many people on Wall Street see that as essential, they may see it as they're screwing up the economy by manipulating currency, by expanding and contracting the money supply. So are we going to, we don't have to go down that road if you don't want to?
No, I think that's fine. Okay. People may not realize this, that yes, the Fed is an independent body or agency of the federal government. It is owned by the federal government. It's owned by us, the citizens. All of the profits and or losses the Fed incurs in its operations go directly to the Treasury. Now, the Fed controls interest rates primarily through what's called Federal Open Market Committee operations, the FMOC. Federal Open Market, FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee operations. And that committee, which meets 3 or 4 times a year or 8 times a year, I can't remember, that committee expands or contracts the money supply by selling bonds to banks, taking money from banks, contracting the money supply, causing banks to cut back on lending, and raising interest rates. Conversely, when they buy bonds from banks, they're putting money into the money supply, expanding the amount of money that banks have on hand, giving them great incentive to make more loans and to lower interest rates. So that's the primary way the bank controls or attempts to control or influence interest rates. Now, there's also something called quantitative easing and quantitative constraints, where the bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, buys securities directly from the public. And during the mortgage crisis, the Federal Reserve Bank bought trillions of dollars of securities from the public to keep the mortgage market stable. And then later sold off those securities, pumping money into the economy, sold off those securities and pumped money back into the banks to lift the economy. So those are the primary ways that the Fed operates. Now, the Fed has made tremendous profits and losses. Those profits and losses go directly into the United States Treasury. So it's not Federal Express by any means. So here's what I hope you'll take from this discussion. The next time a politician promises to control interest rates or to criticize Fed independence, ask yourself, do you want your borrowing costs determined by economic data or election calendars? Now, look, I get that the Fed isn't perfect. No institution run by humans ever is. But independence from political pressure means they can make unpopular decisions that protect your financial future, even when those decisions don't help politicians in the short run. I'd encourage you to discuss this with your friends and colleagues, especially those who think the president should have more control over interest rates. Help them understand what's really at stake. If you found this discussion helpful, I'd appreciate your sharing it with others who need to understand these issues. And please let us know your thoughts in the comments section of our site. Do you think Fed independence is worth protecting, or should elected officials have more control over interest rates? Next time, we'll tackle another independence issue that's crucial for our democracy. Why America needs an objective, unbiased, free press. Until then, God bless you and yours, and God bless America.